As I record this episode, several situations are ramping up that can lead to chronic anxiety and worry. These include reports of an increased number of COVID cases, stoking fear among many people of another round of personal restrictions, major weather disasters, and a constant drumbeat of climate change, danger warnings by media, the World Health Organization, many government officials, and other authorities, political and social instability, and a sense that the U.S. and some other countries are no longer a unified nation with shared values. While there are other present-day issues driving anxiety and stress, it is important to recall the world has been a stressful and often dangerous place for thousands of years. The specific issues change over time, but war, crime, social unrest, natural disasters, pandemics, political upheavals, and other sources of titanic risks to life, property, and a sense of safety have been a reality for people and our planet since the beginning of life. Why do uncertainties and dangerous situations seem to be far more anxiety-producing to us today compared to how generations in the past experienced these travails? You and I will answer that very question, and you'll discover research-validated ways to turn your anxiety temperature down and regain your sense of emotional balance and equanimity. You're also going to hear from a well-known YouTube influencer named Bandrew Scott, who was all in with constant social media use until he recognized what that behavior was doing to his well-being, and he found a way out of that debilitating behavior. All of this and ever so much more in this episode of Easy Stress Cures. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Easy Stress Cures podcast. I'm your host, Steve Carter, and I thank you for joining me for this episode. As a brief introduction, I've been helping people move from stress to success for more than 4 decades. Much of that work was done through my company, Stress Solutions, LLC, which is now Stress Solutions USA. You'll discover more about my background and work by visiting our website at stressreliefradio.com, stressreliefradio.com. Turning to the question, why do the uncertainty and potentially dangerous situations seem to be far more anxiety-producing to us today compared to earlier generations? Well, there are 2 parts to the answer. First, the advent of the 24-hour news cycle with nonstop reports of war, disaster, pandemics, partisan political commentary, and too often outright lies, all served up on TV, talk radio, YouTube, and online news sites. Equally destructive to our emotional well-being is the constant stream of supposed news, commentary, likes, shares, countless personal opinion posts by people we call social media friends, who we have never met and have no real knowledge of who they really are and what motivates them to push one narrative or another. Some of the social media sites such as Twitter, which is now X, and Facebook, in my view, tend to be more caustic than others, but they all suffer one critical flaw. There is no easy way to determine what posts are true, half-true, biased, or outright lies. Major sites say they're moderating posts supposedly to remove or warn people about potential misinformation, but more often than not, these moderation actions are too often arbitrary, and in some cases, they censor legitimate science-based research and expert opinions that are at odds with the prevailing official narrative du jour. Far too many supposed news articles and opinion posts are designed to inflame emotions and create controversy and fear. Social media sites are designed to keep you scrolling and interacting with posts for as long as possible. Why? So they can serve up ad after ad and earn billions of dollars a year. Can constant use of social media cause emotional harm? There are multiple studies showing the negative effects of chronic social media use by young people, to include elevated anxiety and depression. I'll have study examples linked in this episode's description, also known as show notes. What about adults? Does chronic hour after hour use of social media have negative effects on adults? Leaving aside the reality that you've seen many times of people sitting in a restaurant with everyone on their phones, ignoring others at the table, including their children, the answer is yes. The mental health of adults can indeed be affected. In an article from Medical Express for August 21 entitled, "The Relationship Between Anxiety Disorders and the Extensive Use of Mobile Phones," we're introduced to a newly identified mental health term, nomophobia. What is nomophobia? According to the study, it's when a person experiences fear or anxiety about not having mobile phone connectivity. It typically stems from a strong perceived need to be technologically connected and concern over what might happen if you suddenly could not access needed information. While some people may dislike the idea of going without their phone for prolonged periods, there are people who experience strong fear or anxiety about not having connectivity with their phone. This can lead to agitation, shallow fear-based breathing, and a range of other symptoms. How about doom scrolling constantly and giving attention to every negative story that shows up? In an August 23rd article from Medical Express entitled, "Following News About Russia-Ukraine War May Be Associated with Depressive Symptoms," says international study, researchers tell us, quote, "The study was conducted in Finland, Canada, and Germany, with each country showing similar results. Watching the war is associated with interfering thoughts that are linked to experiences of depressive symptoms," close quote. The research was published in the Journal of Health Psychology. In a moment, you and I are going to hear from a well-known YouTube creator I have followed for several years. Bandrew Scott has more than 300,000 subscribers for his primary YouTube site. He's named Podcastage. In addition to his widely respected reviews on microphones and other audio equipment, he also has another channel and audio podcast called Bandrew Says. In a recent episode of that podcast, Bandrew shared his own struggles with, my words not his, social media addiction. He'll share how he became ensnared in the swirl of online social media and how he ultimately recognized how emotionally debilitating that behavior was. He'll also share how he broke free of that behavior and how he navigates social media now. After we hear Bandrew's story, I'll return and share research-based guidance on letting go of addictive social media behavior and creating an emotionally healthy way to use social media properly. Let's join Bandrew's commentary right now.
My stance is more along the lines of what good does it do you to be informed of everything going on in the world while allowing that information to have a negative impact on your day-to-day mental health, while allowing that information to make you miserable, while allowing that information to make you hate people around you. I don't think that does any good. In my perspective, being on social media all day scrolling and reading all the negative information while allowing that information to impact your mental well-being accomplishes two things. Number one, it earns these companies a lot more money because you're looking at more ads and that gives them a bigger bottom line. And number two, it stresses you out and makes you miserable. So it's probably going to put you in an earlier grave because as your stress rises, as your blood pressure rises, that is incredibly unhealthy. That's all that I think it accomplishes. Most of the negative stuff that we read about online has minimal to no impact on our day-to-day life. And I am speaking from personal experience here because I allowed social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all of it to impact me way too deeply. I got way too wound up in 2020, 2021, 2022. I became a very negative person. I became a miserable person. I was mean to people who did nothing wrong to me. I just took out my anger on them. That is what I allowed these sites to do, these algorithms to do. If you have the mental fortitude to avoid that, and it doesn't impact your day-to-day well-being, more power to you. I don't have that. If I am reading all the negative news in the world, it is going to impact me. It is going to make me an angry person. It is going to make me a scared person. It is going to make me a mean person. So that is why I advocate against doom scrolling and staying up to date on every single thing going on in the world because it doesn't have a positive impact on most people's lives. On top of that, there is very little to nothing that most of us who were staying that informed could do to change any of it. So instead of wasting all of that mental energy, wasting all that emotional energy on nonsense that I have no impact on and has no impact on me, I started focusing on my family and my friends and the stuff that goes on around me in my local community. What can I do to improve this issue or that issue? Is there something I can do to help a family member or a friend? I focus on that because that is stuff that is within my control. And that was the big light bulb moment for me. That was the big life-changing realization for me. I should only allow stuff that is within my control, stuff that I can actually influence. I should only allow that stuff to impact my mental well-being. I should only allow that stuff to impact my day-to-day mood because why am I really going to worry about what's going on in a different state, in a different country? Yes, there may be instances where there's a tragedy where you might be able to contribute and help. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not saying be heartless. I am just saying take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And in most cases, for most people, the bigger picture is I need to take care of those around me. I need to focus on making sure that people around me that I love are taken care of. I need to make sure that the community that I am living within, the city that I'm living within, the state that I'm living within is doing the best that it can, because that's where I can actually have an impact. I can impact the people that I walk by every single day. I can be kind to people and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" That's an impact for a lot of people. I can give to local charities because that is much more likely to have a big impact than that money going to the federal government. Not going to go down that road, but I think you get my point. It's not be heartless. It's not be ill-informed. It is don't allow this widening scope that we're expected to adopt to ruin your life, to ruin your mindset, to ruin your day-to-day well-being, to ruin your mental health. Because I see a lot of people, and maybe it's wrong for me to look at other people and assume what's going on, but looking at what people behave like on social media, to me it seems like a lot of people have fallen into that trap. A lot of people have lost a lot of perspective and probably lost a lot in their personal lives as well because of it. And I think it's healthy to take a step back.
So how can you create a healthier, more conscious relationship with the news and social media? Let's begin with guidance from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, also known as the ADAA. This from their post, Is Watching the News Making Your Anxiety Worse? Tips for Staying Informed and Managing Anxiety. Like all of the resources I mentioned in this episode, everything will be listed and linked in the show notes, including this guidance and Bandrew's website and show information. To the question, is watching the news making my anxiety worse? Dr. Jacqueline Bullis tells us, quote, when we try to feel more in control of our lives by seeking certainty during an uncertain time, it actually makes our anxiety worse. Watching the news throughout the day or repeatedly checking our social media feeds for the latest updates may be comforting in the moment because it feels like we are taking steps to remain informed, and that in turn reduces our anxiety. Unfortunately, this effect is short-lived. Staying glued to the news actually increases our anxiety in the long term because it contributes to the false belief that if we have enough information, we can remain in control. In other words, the more we seek certainty over what will happen in the future, well, the more anxiety we will feel. She goes on, try these tips to stay informed without making your anxiety worse. First, ask yourself whether the information is helpful or unhelpful. If the news you're consuming isn't providing new information that educates you on how to protect yourself, it is unlikely to be helpful. Be selective about where you get your news and stick to trusted sources of information. Next, set boundaries around news consumption by limiting how often you check for new developments. For example, you can bookmark trusted websites and briefly check them once a day for any new updates. Next, if people you follow on social media are inundating your feeds with anxiety-provoking information, you can mute them or hide their posts from your feed. It's also important to remember that news we consume via social media may not come from legitimate sources and might contain more opinions than facts. Finally, remind yourself that it's normal and natural to be feeling anxious and worried. Do your best to practice acceptance of whatever emotion you're feeling in the moment. And remember, well, that emotion will dissipate with time. Let's turn to the website headspace.com. That resource tells us, quote, news used to enter our homes and our minds on an invite-only basis. We chose to buy a newspaper or to turn on the evening report before returning our focus to our own lives. But since the rise of the 24-hour news cycle, the internet and cell phones, it is becoming increasingly difficult to switch off the constant stream of headlines. It is, of course, important to be informed, but not at the expense of our mental health. In the How Do We Deal with News Anxiety section, they tell us, stress and anxiety are two different states with some crossover of symptoms. Stress is a response to an external trigger or perceived threat, while day-to-day anxiety is a culmination of internal worry and a physiological stress response, and is often absent of a threat. It is possible that concerns surrounding world events could trigger either of these states. This site then shares information from the American Psychological Association about how to handle stress. This specific advice relates to election stress, but it applies to helping mitigate stress and anxiety in general. First, avoid dwelling on things we can't change. Avoid dwelling on things we cannot change. Many people imagine worst-case scenarios during times of uncertainty, yet are unable to do anything to impact the outcome. By breaking this habit, we can take control of our minds. Next, focus on what is within our control. Focus on what is within our control. Limit media consumption if it is causing us stress. Give ourselves a break from the news, or designate a specific time slot each day to catch up on world events, rather than subjecting ourselves to around-the-clock headlines. Next, channel our concerns to make a difference on issues we care about. By engaging in community or charity work, or by simply voting, we can turn our concerns into positive action. Next up, stay active and socially connected. Stay active and socially connected. Information overload can be reduced by releasing energy through exercise, and stress can be alleviated by talking to a friend. The last piece of guidance, tune out if we want to. Tune out if we want to. As with many things in life, it is often our relationship with something that determines our mood rather than the thing itself. The news is the news, with or without us, reflecting events even in the outside world. How much we engage with the news is up to us. So if engaging with the headlines is proving detrimental to our mental health, we can always choose to tune out or at least limit how much news we are absorbing. To these worthy suggestions, I would like to add 3 of my own. I and many clients have successfully used to keep news and social media-induced anxiety in check. First, schedule a limited amount of time, say 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, to sign in and check social media sites and text messages. Scan posts and text messages and interact only with those from family, business associates, or friends that must be replied to. After 10 minutes, sign out of all your accounts. If your family or business situation allows, turn the phone completely off. Secondly, do not sign into Facebook or any other social media site if you're working with your computer during the day. If someone really needs to reach you, well, they'll call or they'll text. And finally, during meals and times you're interacting with family or friends, put your phone in a place you cannot easily get to it. Ensure your kids and spouse do the same. Remember, your children look to you as a role model. If your nose is buried in a phone, the message you send them is whatever is happening on your phone is more important than they are. Will following these 3 suggestions at first create a bit of unease? Yeah, probably so. But after 2 or 3 days, you won't give the absence of your phone a second thought. You will be calmer. Your loved ones will feel that they matter, and you'll experience a deeper level of connection with family and friends. Everyone wins, everyone that is, but those social media and news sites who want to keep you prisoner to doom scrolling, elevated stress, and anxiety so they can sell you stuff you don't need, whether that's political hype or unneeded products or services. I would like to offer Bandrew Scott a special thank you for allowing me to share a segment of his Bandrew Says podcast. You'll find Bandrew's website, which is bandrewsays.com, bandrewsays.com, and a companion site, geeksrising.com. You can also tune in to Bandrew's Podcastage and Bandrew Says YouTube channels. You'll find links to all of those resources, along with other resources I've mentioned in this episode description. You will find those in the show notes. If you are not yet following Easy Stress Cures in your application of choice, this is a perfect time to do that. When you follow, also known as subscribing, you will never miss an episode. To listen to previous episodes of Easy Stress Cures and other network podcasts, visit our website at stressreliefradio.com, stressreliefradio.com. If you would like to comment on this episode or otherwise be in touch, email me at cartermethod@gmail.com, cartermethod@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Until our next visit together, this is your host for the Easy Stress Cure Show, Stephen Carter, wishing you and your loved ones blessings in abundance.